Hello, I'm Simon and welcome to the SciRob YouTube channel. And if you've got a manual transmission with a hydraulic clutch, like most modern cars, you'll want to be changing the clutch fluid. I do mine normally every 2 years when I bleed the brakes and flush the system through. I'm going to be showing you on my Volvo S60 using a Sealy VS820 pressure bleeder, just showing you the pipe work from the master cylinder, which has some pipes going into the brake control unit, the ABS unit, but there's another pipe coming from underneath the master cylinder which actually goes into the clutch, and it goes into the clutch master cylinder and then onto the slave cylinder to move the clutch, and it's set slightly higher in the brake reservoir, and that's so that if you have a hydraulic fluid loss, you'll lose clutch operation before you lose the braking operation. And so that's an extra safety feature that's built in. You can see that it's a little bit higher than the feed for the braking system. So slave cylinder bleed nipple locations vary. On my car it's accessible just with the bonnet up. I don't have to go under the car, but I'll show you another car where you do have to go underneath afterwards. And if I look down through the engine bay, you can see the bleed nipple for the slave cylinder, which is coming out of the gearbox. The actual slave cylinder itself is inside the gearbox, so I'd have to split the casing to change the slave cylinder. But for bleeding, for maintenance purposes, for changing the fluid, I can do that just with the bonnet up, and it's quite a simple operation. With the airbox removed on my car, I can get better access to it this way, and you can see it once again just there, very similar to a brake bleed nipple. So it's always worth just spraying a bit of penetrating fluid onto it before making a start. And also mine is a 9mm nut. These vary. It's normally 9 or 11 mil. That's seems to be the general size that I've found, but it can vary, and like I say, the location can vary as well. So I just make sure that it can open just by releasing it and then locking it back up again, and then I can get everything set up with the brake bleeder. And you're also going to need a bottle and a tube to fit onto the bleed nipple in order to catch the fluid that you're taking out. So I've got my brake bleeder tool just here. I've got sufficient fluid in there to cover the pickup tube at the bottom, and then I'll close everything up and seal it. And you also prime the tube coming out of the brake bleeder and going into the brake reservoir, so you've always got a constant stream of fluid, and when you pump up the bleeder you're not going to be introducing air into the system, so make sure the bleeder fluid is always primed. And I just remove the reservoir cap, and if you've got a filter in there like I have, make sure that's taken out. This is just me speeding up the pumping up of the brake bleeder, and I'm taking it up to around about 10 psi, which should be plenty. So I'm now all set up. The bleeder is primed, and so it's just a question now of getting the tube onto the bleed nipple, as you can see just there, and then just running the spanner over the tube and then down onto the bleed nipple. And because the system's pressurized, basically as soon as I open that up, fluid should start coming out, and any air, there was just one air bubble, so so I had no air in the clutch system at all. And you basically just leave it running. It will if you've got very old dark fluid in there, it'll gradually change colour, and I normally take around about 100 millilitres out of the system, which is plenty to flush through that particular line. And you're basically looking for the colour of the fluid coming out to be the same as the fresh colour of the fluid going into the system, and this brake bleeder is replacing what you take out automatically just through the pressure. So it's a very, very simple system, and one that I would highly recommend. I'll leave a link in the description and in the pinned comment for this particular tool that I use. It's a fantastic tool and just makes bleeding the whole hydraulic system, whether it's the brakes or the clutch, it makes everything very straightforward, and you can do it all on your own as well. So once it's done, just make sure that the bleed nipple is closed up, and just clean away any spilt fluid just to make sure that you can see that the nipple isn't leaking any hydraulic fluid anywhere. And I leave the bleeder tool still pressurized on the system for 2 or 3 minutes just to make sure that it's not losing pressure anywhere, and the system is sealed and refreshed and done all in one go. And that's what I took out. Pretty dark, and the clutch feels so much better. So on this car, this one's a Mitsubishi Colt, and once again exactly the same kind of system, a hydraulic clutch. On this though, you have to go underneath the car, and the slave cylinder, the entire slave cylinder, is bolted to the outside of the gearbox, and it just has a cover on the bleed nipple. So same process again, the system's pressurized, and it's just a question then of cracking off the bleed nipple, just loosening it. This particular one was an 11mm spanner required to open it. Put the tube onto it, and then because I've loosened the nut already, I can then just twist it by hand. A few more bubbles in this, around about 4 or 5 air bubbles coming out of this one, and once again just take out around about 100mm, and that's it, job done, and the system's fully refreshed and no air in the system as well, and it restores good clutch operation, and make sure that when the clutch operates, the clutch plate is nice and quickly disengaged and then re-engaged, because you've got good pressure in the system and no air. So once again, just taking the tube off, cleaning off the nipple, leaving the bleeder on pressurized just to make sure there's no leaks, and then on this particular one just replace the rubber cap, and that's it, job done. So the traditional 2-person method, I'll just go over this very quickly, but that basically involves one person in the car and another one outside at the bleed nipple, and you basically press the clutch pedal down, release the bleed nipple for about 3 seconds, close the bleed nipple, release the clutch pedal, then they press back in the clutch pedal, you release the bleed nipple, close the bleed nipple, release the clutch pedal, and you repeat that. It's quite a slow way of doing it, and it can take some time, especially if you've changed the clutch and you have an empty hydraulic system. It really can take quite a while, so I don't recommend the 2-person method, but that's basically how you do it if you know, you've got no alternative. Then the alternative 1-person method, if you don't have a clutch system like mine, is to basically just buy one of these tubes with a one-way valve, put that onto the slave cylinder and open it, and because the one-way valve doesn't allow air back into the system when you release the clutch pedal, you can just repeatedly press the clutch pedal and it will flush out the fluid. Both the 2-person and 1-person method though do require you to make sure that the brake fluid reservoir remains topped up all the time, because you haven't got a system automatically filling it like the Sealy. And that's it. Hope you find that useful, and thanks very much for watching.